What is going on, guys? I am back this time for the second week of This Week in Bodybuilding. So, episode 2. This is going to be the Olympia recap episode. Getting this out a day late as I was sick pretty much the whole weekend, unfortunately. Had plenty of time to sit back, relax, recoup, and enjoy the O, but unfortunately, it was just a little under the weather to the point where I didn't want to record because I barely had a voice and I still sound a little shitty. So, apologies for that, but we're going to get right into things because there is a lot to cover. Obviously, it was an awesome Olympia weekend. I was out and about for a bit of the weekend, doing some different events over the weekend, visiting with some people, and watching the O with the watch party was super exciting, super fun to actually get out and be in Vegas for the Olympia. It was super cool. But yeah, let's just get right into the rankings and how things ended up. I will start by saying my top 10 was, I had a lot of the contenders for the top 10 correct, but my placings were completely fucking wrong. My placings were all over the place here. So in front of you, you'll see the official scorecard for Open. Obviously, for those who watched and know, it was Samson, Hadi, Derek, Martin, Andrew, Hunter, William, Rafa, Brandon, and Akeem. Very surprised to see Akeem in that top 10. He came out great, don't get me wrong. I just think that Akeem lacks so much from the back that I'm very surprised to see he beat out Jewett for the top 10 because Jewett's showing was just absolutely amazing. I mean, you can see here on the scorecard that he didn't beat him in prejudging. In fact, he was far behind him in prejudging. He was as far down as like almost would have been 11th, right? Or sorry, 13th. Um, but he really made up for it at the finals. And he did look great. Again, conditioning was awesome. And from the front, Akeem looks freaking great. Um, Really surprised that John did not crack that top 10, though. I was really hoping to see that. But again, for his first showing in the O and 11th place, and to see how amazing he looked on stage, a lot of potential there. But going through from the top side, get off my rant on John Jewett here. I think this is kind of the best outcome I could have hoped for. And I think that based on the top 10, probably with the exception of Akeem and maybe the exception of Rafa, I think they got everything pretty fucking correct. Um, so yeah, let's just start by saying Samson is your new Mr. O, taking the Sandow back to the UK for the first time since Dorian, I think. So that is awesome. Congrats to Samson. I mean, his showing was absolutely insane and he deserved it, every bit of it. And in fact, you know what? Let's just do this. I'll just keep that list up on the side and we'll go through and take a look at some of these guys' stage pictures. I'm sure everybody has seen it, but I just want to obviously go through and see some of the post O pictures that have been posted. I mean, Samson just looked incredible. This was absolutely the best Samson we have ever seen. I mean, it's amazing to me that he was able to achieve this look and the best version of himself being coached by his wife. I mean, huge, huge, huge props to her. Um, Amazing to see that they brought Samson in this great a condition and just overall this great a shape. I mean, he was perfect. He was spot on. There's nothing I think that would have made his performance better other than maybe still improving his back some. But that's like once he dials that in, man, he's going to run away with this for a long time. Um, my original rankings, I think I had him in fourth, but Andrew did not come in improved as we thought he would. And I think he was honestly a little bit off, especially at prejudging. He tightened up for finals, but at prejudging, he was definitely looking a little a little rougher than I expected, and without major improvements. Um, as far as the other top four, top three kind of guys, Derek, I think, is the big one to talk about his slip here. And it's got to be a tough pill for him to swallow, slipping from, being Mr. Olympia all the way down to third place in just 1 year. But at the same time, I just didn't think Derek really brought it. I mean, I was expecting him to. And then when he got out there, I was just completely unimpressed. Now, as you saw in my previous video, and for those who know me, I was not hugely impressed with Derek last year, and I thought Hadi should have won last year. It looks like we don't have any updates from Derek here, so let's just go to. So I think something that I will say about Derek is his conditioning was not as on point this year, and from the back, his hamstrings looked quite small. I don't personally like his legs either, but I don't think they're bad per se from the front. But I think his hamstrings weren't there. He wasn't as conditioned as he was last year. His condition was still decent, but it wasn't like last year. And I think that the biggest thing that hurts Derek and will continue to hurt him unless he makes some serious improvements on it is just that chest. I mean, I don't know if they have a picture here, but yeah, this chest is just not a Mr. Olympia level chest, especially when he hits this crab most muscular here. I don't know why he hits it this way because this is not the shot for him. He is involving all of his shoulder through this pose, and it is so much. It's just a front delt move pose for him. There's nothing going on in the chest here, and some guys, they shouldn't hit this pose because of that. And I think Derek's one of them. And for me, this is the area that like lost him the O this year. His chest was just not up to par at all. Especially when you compare it to Hadi and Samson. I mean, let's see if we can find some pictures of Hadi here. And just to illustrate, actually, before I touch on Martin, just to illustrate what a good crab most muscular should look like, look at Martin. Like, this is fucking amazing. This is insane. I mean, again, we'll get to Martin more in a sec because Martin is just has blown me away with his presentation. But compare that to Derek's, and Derek's is just completely flat. There's nothing going on there, and it just doesn't look good. So, to not to rail on Derek too hard, but he took third, and I think it was perfect placing for him. Arguably, I think Martin could have got third. In fact, I guess now that I think about it, I would put Martin ahead of Derek personally, just from this showing alone. But let's see here if we can find Hadi's pictures. There we go. But man, Hadi just looks gnarly. Like, you gotta love Hadi. Year after year, he just shows up so fucking good. And he fought for it. It was close. I think I have the scorecard here. I think the score was like a 3 point difference, maybe? Yeah, they were tied in prejudging. It was 3 points in finals. It was very close to being Hadi's show again. And if Hadi had won instead of Samson, I don't think I would have been upset. Um, but it is nice to see Samson win. I think he deserved it, especially with as hard as that dude works and as much as he puts into the sport. I personally have to say I've never been the biggest fan of his physique. Just overall, I think if we're comparing someone who's his most direct comparison, I like Andrew's physique more. They have very similar frames, and I just find Andrew's physique to be better in terms of an aesthetic physique, whereas Samson just doesn't really do it for me. But he still deserved it, man. It was an awesome showing for Samson, the best we've ever seen. So very happy for him. But like I was saying, would not have been upset if Hadi won because I mean, look at Hadi, man. These pictures are just, man, this is insane. Like, and this to go back to last year, goes back to what I'm saying. I can't believe that Derek was able to beat this last year. And I guess to be fair, Hadi was a little off last year, the 23 Olympia, but this is just nuts. This is crazy. Hadi looks so fucking good year after year. Um, I stand by what I said in my top 10 prediction video in last week's episode. I think that this is probably not the best Hadi we've seen, but it's really fucking close. He came in great. He did awesome. These top three, absolutely perfect, with the exception of, again, I think that Derek should have been fourth to Martin. I do. I really think this was not Derek's showing. I don't think he I don't think he was, how can I put this? If Derek had not won last year, I think he would have been further down in probably fourth place, and Martin would have taken third. But I think they probably made a consideration. Everyone likes to think they don't make considerations and there's no politics, and I don't think there is. But what I'm saying is, I think that if the judges had judged Derek so harshly that they moved him down to fourth and put Martin ahead of him, that would have been big. Like that would have been a really even more of a shocker than putting Derek in third. So I think that maybe there was a little bit of that kind of inherent bias in their minds where it's like he's the previous Mr. O, and that is what kind of kept him in that third place spot. But I think Martin honestly could have taken it. Now, that being said, let's touch on Martin. Fourth place in his Olympia debut. Fucking insane. This is one of my favorite bodybuilders currently because he just has such a balanced, good flow to his physique. Everything about Martin looks good. There's not one thing I can look at Martin and fault him for. Insane to see him placing this high on his Olympia debut. And I would be curious. I don't know what Martin's body weight was here. I know Martin has said himself his focus is not necessarily to be the biggest guy, but to be the best guy. To have to show people that you can be aesthetic from a symmetry perspective and just have everything balanced really well and beat these guys who are bigger. And I'll be interested to see if he holds himself to that and keeps his size relatively the same compared to where it is now and just fine tunes things, or if he goes to add size. And I think ultimately he needs to add size to be competitive. But my concern is, I guess what I'm trying to get at is I don't want to see Martin force himself to add size and lose that aesthetic that he enjoys so much and that makes him an incredibly good bodybuilder. Because you do see that from time to time where guys just get so big that they start to lose a lot of the definition they have. Some of their lines don't flow as nicely. Sometimes that stomach starts to show out a little bit more, and that additional size actually does them a disservice. And I think that Martin is a guy who can add size without having to suffer from adding it. I think he just has a great physique and it's not going to hurt him to add size. But I will just be curious to see what his take on that is and kind of what his plan is going forward and how the next year plays out for him going into the O next year. Because again, fourth place in your Olympia debut is crazy. Crazy. I mean, he's got such a long career ahead of him too. Like, my opinion is that Martin is probably the next guy who, if he gets in and secures himself an Olympia win early enough in his career, which I think he can, I think he will be one of the guys, probably the next guy, who can run away with the title for year after year after year for 5, 6 years. I genuinely think his physique is just so well balanced. He has great insertions. He has just a great look all around. He just needs to refine it. He just needs to add a little more size overall to it without losing the detail. That's the critical part here. And he can absolutely just make this show his year after year. I genuinely think that. Now, will that happen next year? I don't think it would happen that quickly. Will it happen the year after? Who knows, right? I don't know what the timeline looks like there, but I do think it's doable for him. I do genuinely think it is very much within Martin's grasp. So awesome to see him take fourth place at his first O. That is just super exciting. Side note, it's got to feel super exciting for Fuad and for Hostile and to have two of their athletes in the top five. I mean, Mr. Olympia and a guy who got fourth in his debut is just insane. So props to them as well. That's just awesome. I mean, even here, you can see Martin next to Derek. I just think Martin brings a better look, personally. I really do. I really, really do. That being said, let's move on from Martin. Let us hop down to, if I can find him. Here we go. Finally found him. Let's look at Andrew. So, Andrew took, let me double check my list here. I think fifth. Yeah, fifth. Right behind Martin. And I don't think many people were expecting Martin to be Andrew, let alone be as high as he placed. But Andrew, to me, has some of the most potential in this entire lineup. He has, let me put it this way, he has the highest ceiling but I feel like he also has the most room to improve, or the he needs the highest amount of improvement out of this lineup. I think that he just missed the mark on his posing again. And from the back, he just needs more size. He just needs more. His prejudging look, his um, conditioning seemed a little bit worse. Like he didn't look great on that first night. The second night he came in great though. But these side shots, man, these kill him. He needs to crowd like this makes his hamstring look so poor. Just hitting the shot the way he does. He needs to bring this down like another 6 inches and really sit into this because the upper body is nuts. It's great, but he just needs to improve these side shots. You know, it looks like he maybe changed up the way he hits his side chest a little bit. It's not as much of an exaggerated lean as he's had in the past, but it's still he's losing a ton of ground on showing off his leg here. He's still kind of doing this lean back, and it doesn't look as great through the upper body. I mean, this is just nuts, though. This front lat spread is wild. Like, seeing this shot, you know, like I said, he's got the highest ceiling of any guy up there, but I think he needs to make a lot of improvements. I do. I think there's a lot of room for him to improve in a lot of different ways: size, conditioning, posing. He has things he can do to improve across all those categories, whereas there are other guys on the stage, let's say Hottie, who don't have as much room to improve. I mean, there's Hottie really can't add any more size, not without ruining the look of his physique. His conditioning is, I mean, there's a reason we say Hottie conditioning when we're trying to tell people, you know, what kind of condition they need to bring. It's because Hottie's condition is fucking nuts and his posing's great. So what more can Hottie do? He just has to keep coming in amazing year after year and really keep fighting for it. But someone like Andrew, you know, to solidify my point here, has a lot of room to improve across pretty much every judgeable criteria. He just needs to act on it and come in better. That's it. But overall, I will say I think fifth is probably accurate placing for him in this show, in this lineup, based on how he performed. I think fifth was a good spot for him, and he is absolutely where he belongs based on Friday and Saturday's showing. Now let's take a look at the rest of the list here. Hunter. Hunter. Okay, so let's take a look at Hunter. Hunter looks good. The problem I have with Hunter, and it's it's so hard for me to pinpoint problems I have with Hunter because Hunter is one of the most imposing guys on the stage. He's huge. He's huge. But there's something about Hunter's physique, and I can't ever really put my finger on it. The only thing I can put my finger on with Hunter's physique that I dislike is that midsection. His midsection is just not pretty. It doesn't flow well with his physique. And if I'm honest, it just doesn't really, it just doesn't look good. I think he does a good job of controlling it the best he can, but I just think his midsection really holds him back. But outside of that, I can't fault Hunter's physique. I just think that the problem Hunter has and the reason he continually finds himself in like fifth, sixth, seventh kind of placings is just that he doesn't have what I would consider a pretty physique. He's got a lot of mass. Everything is symmetrical and even and balanced. His conditioning is good. He does everything he can to control that stomach, that midsection, and to actually make that not a huge noticeable weak point. But beyond that, I think he just doesn't have a physique that you look at and you go, this is pretty, in the way that you look at someone like Andrew Jack's physique or even Hottie's. And I think that may be another thing that holds him back too. You know, you think of someone like Hottie and you think, you know, that crazy conditioning, those crazy, you know, those abs in that midsection, even his back is a standout point, honestly. And, you know, you look at someone like Derek, his back is a huge standout point for him. The problem Hunter has is that he has nothing that stands out except for a negative that stands out in terms of his stomach at times. Not all the time, but at times. So I think that's what keeps Hunter down year after year. I think they were pretty solid with their placing this year, putting him in sixth. I could see an argument for maybe putting Hunter ahead of Andrew, but it really that's subjective. Okay. I think based on objective criteria and what we saw, Hunter's placing is pretty solid. I have no complaints about that. Now, I also will say this is probably the best Hunter we've seen. That's really good. Now, the challenge there for Hunter, I think, is if this is the best Hunter we've seen yet, and he's still got the same placing he usually gets, where do you go to improve from here? For me, if I was Hunter, I think honestly, focus on improving his strong points to give him some of that pop, some of that kind of flair that makes something stand out, because right now he just doesn't have it. And then on top of that, work on doing whatever you can for that midsection. He doesn't have a huge problem, I think, with like size of his midsection in the same way that someone like Nick Walker does. I think it just doesn't have a pretty flow to it. Another good example of this would be someone like James Hollingshead, who doesn't really have pop in his midsection that really makes the physique connect top to bottom and flow really well. Um, so what can you do for that? It's hard to say, but I think if there's a way to improve it and they can improve it, then that would be where I would think the priority should be. But moving on from Hunter, this one surprised me. This was a big surprise. So I had Bonac in the top 10. I believe I had him ninth. Yes, I think. Let me double check that. Yeah, I had Bonac ninth, and he ended up placing seventh. So awesome to see. I mean, I love Bonac's physique, always have. Let's see if we can find some better pictures here. Well, I couldn't find any better pictures than this of Bonac, but I think he looks great. I really, like I said, I love Bonac's physique. I think seventh was higher than I expected, but I don't think it was undeserved. I think this was a good placing for him, and I don't have a whole lot to say about this one. I think that the biggest issue he has is just that people are constantly going to be comparing Bonac from before to Bonac now. So when you see his physique now, you're seeing him through the lens of what he was before making his comeback, and he's downsized in some areas because of that. There's obviously not as much tissue as there was before. But that being said, he still looks great. I mean, absolutely phenomenal. Seventh place, absolutely awesome. He looked great. Not a whole lot much more to say. He looks great. He deserves the placing. That's that. Now, the last three of the top 10. The Brazilians are going to hate me for this one. I had some guy comment on my last video like, Rafa in top 10 or Rafa in 10th, you're crazy. He ends up taking fucking 8th. I think this was high. This is one of the placings I disagree with because after seeing Rafa on stage, I'm not impressed with this. Not 8th place impressed with this. I think he still lacks size. And I think his conditioning could have been better here, for sure. That mirror picture he posted before the show was a bit deceptive. But you can see here, he just needs better conditioning and he just needs more size, especially from the back. The back kills him. It's not the worst, but he just needs more. And I want to like Rafa's physique. I just have a hard time liking it when I see him on stage. He looks great in pictures, but every time I see him on stage, it just feels like nothing's changed. It feels like no improvements were made. Like this is the same Rafa we've been seeing. And I want to see a better Rafa. I want to see him better. Because I think if he does improve and make those big improvements, he's going to look fucking insane. He's got a ton of potential. I love his physique from that perspective. I just think I love what it could be and not what it is currently. That's my biggest gripe. So I think this was high for Rafa. I personally would have still put him probably in ninth. Probably in ninth. But overall, it's pretty close. Last one here, or second to last one, sorry. Who am I missing? I know that's actually not the last one. Oh, before we move to Akeem, I almost forgot about Curry. And that kind of sets the tone because I think that's probably how a lot of people were this year. I think a lot of people kind of forgot about Curry. He looked good, but the conditioning wasn't there, I don't think. not as well as it could have been. And I think there's, how can I put this? His physique is just starting to look kind of worn out. You know, like I said before in my prediction video, Brandon's near the end of his career. Um, I think he's fighting it, but I think that time has to come soon. And it kind of shows. I don't have a lot more to say about this. I mean, he looked great, don't get me wrong, but there definitely needs to be better conditioning here. And yeah, I think ninth place is pretty reasonable. I honestly, if I had to switch up the last three, which is probably my biggest conundrum here, I probably would have put John Jewett in 10th, Brandon in 8th, and Akeem in ninth. Honestly, I might even put John Jewett in ninth, Akeem 10th, Brandon 8th, and then Rafa in like 11th. I think that would actually be more reasonable. That's probably what I would have done. But moving on, because I don't have much to say on Brandon there, let's take a look at Akeem. Because this is one of the things that, I mean, Akeem is one of the guys I have a really hard time with because he looks great. Like from the front, oh, he's got no stage shots. And no stage shots of Akeem. Bummer. Well, we can't go off stage shots then, so I have to pull up this old update. The problem I have with Akeem is his back, and it's always going to be his back. You know, he does everything he can. He has a great front shot in every way. His back is just lacking, and it holds him back. And I don't have much more to say about that other than I think that it's such a glaring weakness for him. I think he probably could have been one spot lower than where he was, but overall he looked good. He didn't look as great at prejudging, but he really came back good for finals. So I'll give him that. Let's look at John Jewett now. John Jewett, his Olympia Open debut, absolutely awesome look for him. I mean, he nailed this like through and through. The conditioning that was there. I think looking at John, the thing that John needs is just size. Um, I mean, this is an awesome package. He brought a great showing to the Olympia this year for his Olympia, his open debut. But as a former 212 guy, he just needs more size. The other things that will kind of hold John back is just his structure. But I think if he can add size to the point where the structure becomes a lesser issue, he can absolutely be a top 6 kind of guy. I could easily have seen him with more size fighting someone like Hunter or Andrew. So maybe even top 5 kind of guy. But as of right now, awesome first showing for him. Happy to see how he progresses in the future for sure. And I think that is about where I will stop that rundown there. Just kind of get through the top 10, 11 guys. I know John was just outside of it, but he was in my top 10, so I wanted to cover that at least. I think we got everybody else there. Overall, awesome show. It was a great Olympia. I mean, one of the best lineups we've seen in years. Super competitive. Like, right now, bodybuilding at the highest level is in such a cool place because we're seeing a new Olympia, a new Mr. Olympia every year. There's such a tight race that it's anybody's game, and that makes it exciting because there's always so much back and forth that can happen and so much of an unknown. It's just awesome to see. It's just really cool. Now, outside, I normally don't touch on classic. This is normally just bodybuilding, but I wanted to touch on classic. And I think you all know why. Chris Bumstead is retiring. He is retiring. And he won his 6th. So, an awesome way to go out on a good note. And I don't think anybody doubted that he was going to win. The retirement is not so surprising to me, knowing that he has just had a lot of struggle with kind of the mental side of things and, you know, pushing for this year after year after year. Now that he's got his daughter in the picture, I think it's just, you know, it was kind of a matter of time, and a lot of people were expecting this. I'm really happy for him to see him go out on a good note, to see him retire on a win, be the undisputed classic physique champion. And I mean, I think everybody who is a fan of modern bodybuilding, even if you're not a fan of classic, You have to thank Chris for the attention he has brought and the life he has breathed back into the sport, because it has absolutely ignited bodybuilding for a lot of people. He has, that is. He has absolutely brought a lot more people, especially younger guys, into the sport and helped create modern bodybuilding as it is today. So awesome to see him win and go out on a good note. Um, yeah, not much more to say about Chris, but I will say him retiring leads a huge gap in Classic. Classic will be probably one of the most exciting lineups we've ever seen next year, because we have so many guys who are absolutely capable of filling Chris's shoes and taking that first place spot. But it can go so many different ways that it's going to be interesting to see the battle next year. And let's see here if I can find, here's a good comparison picture. So, top three this year: Chris, Mike, Urs. Ramon, I think, was what, fourth? And then Breon in fifth. To see Ramon drop was a big surprise. Um, the bigger surprise was how close Mike Sommerfeld came to knocking Chris out of first. I was honestly rooting for Mike. I think there were some poses that Mike beat Chris in. Like, it was very close. And I'm super excited to see what happens next year with Mike, Urs, Ramon, Breon, even Wesley, who didn't place very good this year, but I think he'll come back better next year, fighting for that top spot. I mean, it's going to be a super interesting field, and just huge props to Mike here. Obviously, I think, Chris Bumstead is the winner, but I think the biggest winner on this stage in Classic is Mike. He went from being, I think, eighth 2 years ago, or fifth 2 years ago, eighth last year, I think, to second place and almost unseating Chris Bumstead in 1 year. Like, that's crazy. He's made insane progress. He looks awesome. And I think that the thing about Mike is, as a shorter guy, he sets an interesting new precedent for the Classic division, because Classic for the past 6 years has just been, well, who has a structure that looks like C-Bum? Because he has set the standard for the category, for the division. But Mike, you know, he mixed that up a little bit by coming in second and having a bit of a different look than Chris does. It makes it very, very interesting. I'll be really interested to see how Classic plays out next year. It was a very good showing this year as well. Very awesome to see these guys. I think overall the Olympia was just great. It was probably one of the best Olympias we've had in the past 5 years, if not the best. I would say, I would go out to say it was the best. So just really, really cool to see how good of a showing it was. And obviously, let's talk about the prize money too. Holy shit, $600,000 for first place, 250 for second. I mean, how many years ago was it now? 250 would have been close to the first place prize. I mean, Samson, I think, has already announced that he's going to be doing the Arnold. And shit, if he wins both, that's a $1.1 million check between 600 here and 500 at the Arnold. Obviously, Uncle Sam's going to dip his fingers into that a bit, but that is an absurd payday. That's crazy. I mean, it is awesome to see them really upping the ante and this kind of battle between the Arnold and the Olympia. Um, Very happy to see this. I do think they need to kind of up some of the money in the other divisions. Like, Classic Physique could probably go up to 100 for first place. I think would be good to see, especially now since Chris is gone, and it's not just, hey, we're going to start cutting Chris a bigger check. It's, hey, there's actually competition in this category now, and it's going to get interesting. Let's up the ante a little bit. So we'll see what they do with that. But this is just awesome to see that they have upped this prize so much so quickly, and to see that guys are actually going to be able to financially really make something out of this. It's awesome to see the money coming back into bodybuilding, or coming into bodybuilding really, and to see the potential that's there for guys to make a genuine career out of this, sponsors aside. So very, very cool. very happy for Samson again. I think they nailed pretty much all of their placings in the top 10, and it was an awesome show all the way around. So I am feeling like shit still, guys. So I'm going to cut this one a little short. I think that covered pretty much everything anyway. I hope everyone had an awesome time watching the O. If you came into town, I hope you had a good time seeing the show live. If you didn't, I hope everybody enjoyed watching it from home. And let me know what you guys think about the placings. Let me know if you're pissed and you think someone should have placed higher. On that note, guys, that is going to be it for this episode. Until next week, we'll see what news we have over this next week. I'm sure there will be fun new stuff coming in the wake of the Olympia. But until next week, guys, take it easy.